Hello, everyone. This is Yon from my house. I wasn't able to do this lecture for you on Friday because I got a fever, but I'm better now. I'm recording this on Monday, a couple hours before demo day, so you'll see me in a little while. And you probably post this video tomorrow or something. But yeah, anyway, this is supposed to be the last lecture of the semester where I tell you what to do with your lives now that I've opened up the Pandora's box of game development for you. And it would have been such a bummer if I had to leave you without this sort of kind of other type of summary than the one David did, which talked about like the course material. This is more of a like, where can you go from here type stuff. Um, so let's get into it. I've never recorded myself doing a lecture like this before, so I'm sorry if it's a little awkward or whatever, but we'll try to make the best of it. All right, so you know how to make games now, and what now, where to go from here. That's kind of what this is all about, right? Like you've made games in a 3-week course, but now you've had a much longer time to think about it. And normally in the class, I would ask you who here is actually interested in a job in game development. I'm going to assume some of you. If you're not interested in it at all, well, there might still be something in it for you, but I'm kind of going to assume that you at least have some interest in considering games as part of your career going forward. So yeah, in broad strokes, here's what I think the possibilities are: is you either can do more school in many different capacities. You could also do games as a hobby project, and those are also compatible, right? Like you could always do hobby projects no matter what you're doing, if it's school or work. Doing a serious project, and I can tell you kind of like the different shapes that can take. And the last one being do an internship or go do a job, try to get a job somewhere in games. And there's some realities there as well to talk about. So yeah, the first thing I want to talk about is to do more school. What it effectively means is probably 2 or 3 more years of focused study and practice. That's like really what you get out of a school kind of format. But very importantly, excuse me, to understand is that the degree itself will not help you get a job. Like very rarely do people get hired based off of their degree. They will get, it helps. It's kind of like in the sense that it's like a reference, like this person graduated from school. It does mean something, but it is not going to be the thing that helps you get a job. If you spend 2 years making games and have a lot to show for, it is by far much more valuable as a sort of hiring thing than the degree itself. So it's really important to realize that. Like just, kind of passing through a school system to get a degree isn't like a checkbox on recruiters' like form or something. You're going to have to do a lot more than that. So your student projects might help you get a job, and the school environment is what I'm always saying is like the most important thing, is that like you're not very likely to end up in a situation where there's that many people who are your kind of like age group and similar skill level who are all just trying to figure it out. So like the school environment is extremely useful, and if you're financially able to spend 2 years in that environment, then I would recommend it, because it's both going to be really fun. You're going to have a lot of games, and those games, your portfolio, your skill set is what's going to help you get a job, if that's what you want, or it's going to help you become independent, or do whatever you want to do. So yeah, the fourth point here basically is saying your fellow students are more important than the school itself. So like the people you go to school with, your teachers, the school environment, the things you do in afternoons or evenings with your fellow students, game jams that are maybe happening there are more important, I think, than the school framework itself. And bear in mind that most tuition in the EU is free or cheap, and a sort of hidden benefit something I benefited from a lot that wasn't obvious is that by moving abroad to study something, by kind of moving away from my home friends and family, first of all, you have a lot of time, and secondly, you end up bonding a lot with other international students who also, you move the country to do a study. You take it much more seriously than a lot of people who just always lived there, and who just maybe they are just trying to get a degree. without really thinking too much about it, because I may like playing video games. But if you are really dedicated, you can get a lot out of doing international study. And in Denmark, for example, your tuition is completely free, so it's only a matter of supporting yourself to the point where you can pay rent. Yeah, there's some Slack quotes that I sprinkled around here. There'll be some more later. But here's Sig, who I think some of you have met, who came to do a guest lecture at some point, maybe. I'd also mentioned that one way is to go to game design school as a way to build up a network of peers from all over the world. Yeah, basically what I said as well. And so in Iceland, you probably know better than me what's available by now. If you don't, make sure to ask me or David explicitly, and we'll ask our Icelandic games industry friends to make sure. But as far as I understand, there's some game development course at HAI as well, but I think it's bachelor level. And then there's Tekniskolen has like a bachelor equivalent diploma study for games. And then there's RAID, RADE, that I'm not super sure what the status is there, but there are some opportunities in Iceland. On a European level, there's really good schools in the Netherlands, in Denmark, Sweden. A school opened in Malta, which stole half of the faculty of my study in Copenhagen. My second year, all of a sudden, there was no more games teachers at my university because they all moved to Malta. There's cool stuff happening in Scotland, etc. And even outside of Europe, there's NYU is probably the most reputable. Australia in Melbourne has RMIT, where a bunch of people are like really good people are teaching. So yeah, there's a lot of stuff. And if you ever have any sort of I'm considering doing that, and you want my opinion or David's opinion, feel free to reach out anytime in the future. And that doesn't even have to be, that can be years from now if you want to. But yeah, a really big takeaway. This is something my friend Rami from Blambear told me once, which I think is really important, is don't let school get in the way of your education. If school is making you bend yourself in a way that you don't find particularly interesting, or isn't just as a school framework or as an institution performing particularly well, like, lazy university professors do exist. I don't know any of them, but not everybody puts in the same amount of energy or is as compatible with you as a student. So rather than resisting that, it's kind of like, okay, what's the workaround here? What's the patch that lets me actually benefit from this education? And often that is non-official school stuff as much as the school stuff it is itself. Yeah, so that was about school. So you could also do a hobby project, which sounds maybe like obvious, but I think there's some interesting things to say about it. It's of course low pressure. Like you shouldn't have your income depend on your hobbies. It's very common. Like a lot of people, even people with successful games, they're made in evenings and weekends, or by doing a totally different job and then taking 2 months off to finish your passion project. But the really, really important thing about this is that your discipline will be much more important than your talent, and your discipline is much more important than your motivation. And those are sort of mantras, but let me try to unpack them for a second. Is that like you might not feel super talented or super experienced yet, but that's totally fine. You can build that up, but only if you are disciplined. It's easy to say at the beginning of a 6-month span that you're going to spend every Wednesday afternoon and Saturday learning about game development, but actually doing it, actually changing your life to the point where doing that every Wednesday and Saturday or whatever makes sense to you and is enjoyable is way harder than it sounds. But that is usually what separates the people who are successful from the people who aren't. It's not just talent. It's not just like, oh, you're just magically better at this than me. Like, no, this person just really figured out how to motivate themselves, or how to have this like sort of routine pattern in place. Similarly, like motivation, people are sort of like, oh, that person's just more motivated. Like, Jon just has more motivation than me. That might be true, but also a big part of it is discipline. There's many days when I was working on games as hobby projects or after school stuff, that it was difficult. I wasn't self-motivated. I wasn't excited about the work, but you're excited about the result or the end goal. So discipline is basically to get you through the days where it's not just sort of automatic or magically you just feel excited about doing it and it just happens. There will, sooner rather than later, there will be days where it doesn't just happen. So prepare for that and have a contingency plan. And whatever you do with the hobby project, even if you want to do something that's big and ambitious, which is like I would say another thing to be careful of. Like people always want to make their ultimate game now that they're like free from deadlines and constraints, and I think that's cool. And sometimes it works out. Like there are some success stories from that, but much more often, people who make small and short games and release many of them get more mileage out of them. Or if you're the type of person who's not interested in creating a complete game, at least, but you want to make like I don't know tools or explore just like technical ideas like shaders. The most important thing of whatever you do is document it. Is to make sure that you have some sort of proof of the work you put in, if you ever want it to be relevant to somebody besides you, and to release it, to put it somewhere either public or at least on a forum of people whose opinions you might care about. Showing it to other people will get you both validated and also get people to push back on the things you're trying to do, maybe like connect it to other work, etc. Like there's so much to learn from both the documentation and the releasing or publicizing what you've been making. Super, super important. Like it's really easy to spend the next 5 years of your life on evenings and weekends with several burnouts on the next amazing MMORPG game that you have in your head right now. But if nobody ever sees it, it's very likely to never be finished, and it's very likely that you didn't learn, like you won't have learned as much from that time period as you could have had you spent it a little bit more focused. So yeah, hobby projects I think are great if you want to be software developer or whatever, or go into completely different fields and want to keep games kind of on the back burner. Do it, but be cognizant of like if you want to get something out of it, think about discipline and think about how you're documenting and planning to release these things. Just as a reference, maybe I'll try to find a way to attach a link to this, but I made a game in a day the other day with some friends called Gently Down the Marsh, and that was an exercise in exactly this. It was literally made in an evening between 6 p.m., 6 in the afternoon, and 1 a.m. With me and two friends, and we had the idea, we brainstormed on the idea, we prototyped it, we built it, and we documented and released it on itch.io. And it's a super good experience, and it feels like an amazing muscle to flex. While we could have easily started this as like a fun evening project, and it would have very likely not be finished. Like we also have 3 or 4 projects between all of us that are never going to be finished just because we didn't set down these like harsh kind of rules for ourselves of like we're going to do this in one day. Gently Down the Marsh on itch.io, you'll find it. Anyway, hobby projects, but let's talk about serious projects. All right. The main problem with serious projects, by serious I mean something that you can do either full-time or part-time, but like with really dedicated amounts of time. Like basically a hobby project means that you're not very likely to work multiple 8-hour days in a week on something. And a serious project, I think, should mean that at least for some days in the week, you're able to like have this as the main thing that you do. And then the two most important things there is like to find this like freedom or security or money. Like it's really difficult to, take this time away from employment or whatever if you don't have any savings or person providing for you. I find that like it's my biggest source of anxiety is when I only have 1 or 2 months of money left in my company or whatever. It's super terrifying. So never hinge your life or your well-being, both mentally, physically, or financially, on your serious project. Like I think to do that consciously, I would never do that before having shipped several games and knowing the reality of what the entire process is from start to finish, to release, to post support, etc. Because otherwise you're going in completely blind and risking a lot. And especially if you have a family, you're risking other people's well-being. So like, don't do that. Find the freedom, the money, or the security to do a serious project first. Doesn't have to be super hard if you have, a partner or parents if you're lucky enough. But be aware that statistically you're very unlikely to just like magically hit a gold vein and being able to repair any holes that you may have made. I would just say don't dig any holes. And another one is find some level of leadership, which can be in yourself, but it can also be in another person. Like if you have two people, one of them should be doing the first thing, should be finding the freedom, security, or money, or both of you. It's a serious thing. Like you need somebody to understand the very basics of business development, or to at least the very least be excited about figuring out what that means. To understand what the games industry is like, or what selling games online is like, what the possibility space is, and it's huge, which is really positive. Like you can find business practices that are custom to what you want to do, but you need somebody to take that seriously. You can't just be two people burrowing down, making an amazing game, living with partners or parents or whatever, or just having a day job but doing this like super seriously. If you don't have a plan for like how to deal with which platforms are you going to launch on, what does that mean, how do I deal with both technical, like do you have a developer relationship person at that platform? No, how do you find them, etc., or how do I find funding? Like you need somebody to be at least a little bit excited about taking on those challenges, because they're way more important than just making the game if you want to get something out of the serious project. Another option is to just join someone else's serious projects. There's plenty of stuff going around that has momentum. Like grants. Grants is in this list for multiple reasons. Like you can have a project idea or a prototype and apply for grants on a European level or on an Icelandic level. But also other people are doing this already, and they might in their grant proposal have sort of like extra role in there. Like, if me and David want to make a game tomorrow and we apply for a 10 million kroner Rannis grant, that grant might include an extra developer who we haven't found yet, and we haven't really looked very hard because we didn't know if we were going to get the money. Bam, now we have the money, we have that position open. So like being around people who are doing this type of stuff obviously also helps. If you want to do it, if you want to join somebody else's project, or if you want to do a project yourself. This information about grants is a little bit hard to find sometimes, but in my experience, people are very willing to share and talk about it openly if you kind of like reciprocate, right? If you're like also being transparent with them about what you want to get out of it. Like it's, as far as I know, the competition isn't really between games; it's between games and everything else. So people on the game side are in my experience, pretty open in talking about how the grant structures work. Yeah. So do a serious project. There's some unfortunate realities, and I know I'm like very cynical and negative about this stuff. It's just because I want to prevent you from going out and potentially making your life very hard. But I am also like obviously really excited about this. I've been doing the serious project part of this for 5 or 6 years now, and I can do an entire 2-hour conversation about what that has been like, and it has been super positively life-changing. I got the feedback last year from some students that I was being so cynical that I got them too scared to work in the games industry, and that kind of broke my heart. So like, please don't let me intimidate you with all of this. It's just kind of like more of a disclaimer. It's like, if you want to enter the games industry or in any capacity, there's some like scary realities that I would like you to know in advance. But if you still want to do it, I'm very happy to meet you on the other side and try to help you make the best of it. Yeah, this is a slide from a talk by Mike Rose, who runs the publisher No More Robots, where he basically has been doing some research that like we are basically in the sort of hockey stick phase of like, which is a reference to a diagram that goes like up and then like really steeply up, of games being released. Like there's literally 800 games a month being released right now. So just the statistical likelihood that your first project is going to be a big financial success is just small. But that's fine. This is like, at the same time, we have a medium, we have an artistic medium that has one of the highest and most available like audiences and price points. Like if you compare it, if you'd be making poetry or movies, there's not even a question whether your like first independent cinema movie would ever make you a profit. So like you have to just go into it with the right ambitions. Like, yes, games can make a lot of money. Yes, your game is very unlikely to be one of those. That doesn't mean you shouldn't try, or that doesn't mean that you can't make it a sustainable career like I have for the last 5 or 6 years. It's just that it's definitely not because it's games and because games sell well that you'll be successful. In both cases, whether it's a hobby project or a serious project, downscope. Don't add anything that you really critically look at all components of the game. Like, does the game need this? Because you're always going to run out of time and run out of budget and whatever. It's a weird, like, chronic illness that both software and games, but games specifically, have to deal with. Failing is okay. Like, failing, if you do a project and you learn something from it, and at the end of the day you can still pay your rent, that isn't a failure. Like, it's only a failure if you compare yourself to, the Minecrafts or the Candy Crushes. But, like, why would you do that? That's not a valid comparison. It's kind of like, when you cook food for yourself in the evening and you eat it and it tastes good, but it doesn't win any awards, that's not a failed evening. So, like, don't, your game not being financially successful enough to pay for your next game is absolutely fine, and you should almost start from that assumption before doing anything. Find collaborators. Like, even if you think you want to work alone, it's very good to work with other people for a while. There's a lot of stuff you can learn from other people, and they can learn from you. And even without committing to, like, we're going to be together for the next 20 years and have a company, you can do a project together. And again, if you downscope it and if you scope it correctly, that project will have an end date, and then you can evaluate that collaboration. So, like, don't be scared to enter in these partnerships, and be aware that people, work differently, and be an awesome teammate and all that, like, applies in the real world just as much as in this course. And again, like, think about your discipline. It's really important. Like, that's one of the things that has become even more and more important as I go through my career, is that kind of like the excitement doesn't necessarily go away, or didn't go away for me, but it's kind of like it plateaus, like it stagnates. I'm just like, I'm excited about this, but also, like, that's not what gets me out of bed in the mornings anymore, about, like, going to do my video game job. So figure out other patterns and routines that make it work. And yeah, set low expectations, but at the same time allow for the possibility of success, right? Like, there's also people who completely internalize this idea of, I'm never going to be successful, so whatever. And they, for example, would get they would self-host their website on their, like, own computer, because they don't even want to pay, like, $12 a month for web hosting. And then their game gets successful and they get slammed, and within an hour of actually getting, like, front page of Reddit, all their web services go down. Or they didn't pay a font license because they thought nobody would ever play their game, and then they get some lawsuit because now it got popular and they're using stuff that they don't have a proper license for, etc. So, like, allow for the possibility of success. It doesn't take that much extra work to set some, like, sort of gates in place for kind of like, well, if people actually care about it, this is, that's what would happen. But at the same time, don't build your, like, financial plan on the success of something that is this volatile. All right, so that's if you kind of want to, like, do your own projects or go to school, which was the first point. But if you want to do a job or an internship, what I kind of already mentioned in the school part is that, like, your experience is more important than your portfolio, which is more important than your degree. Now, your experience is mostly communicated through your portfolio, but any job position will probably have some hiring procedure where they will try to, like, match the two. But diploma and degree, again, like, it's an interesting talking point, because maybe those people went to the same school, or they know somebody who did, or whatever, or they might be like, oh, so that was your teacher, and that might be a good thing. So, like, it's not worthless, but it's definitely also not the thing that's going to get you the job. If you have a portfolio that has, for example, more games than you made in this course specifically, that's going to be much more relevant. So yeah, experience is what matters. Another thing is like maybe try specializing a little bit. Like generalists are the most common person in our field. So if you have something, there's a bunch of sort of game design and development roles that are a little bit more specific that have you a much higher chance of, if you like actually can like prove that, like I've done some work in this direction, then you are much more likely to be sort of on the top of that stack. I'm talking about, for example, being a technical artist who is somebody who understands both, programming and software development and whatever, but also understands shader code or understand graphics programming to a high degree, so that when a concept artist comes with like, look at this really cool color idea with pink shadows and weird, I don't know, movie grain, that you know how to implement that. That's what a technical artist does. Or a working on, this isn't why network is there, but if you've made a game that uses networking, then you can become somewhat of a networking expert, or at the very least bring that up if they're looking for, very often these game development jobs will have a bullet point list of like nice to haves, and a lot of them are often sort of like, well, my game is going to have networking, so it would be super nice if the Unity developer that I'm hiring has experience with networking. So yeah, think about maybe specializing in something, because just advertising yourself as a generalist is usually not particularly appealing for people who just need somebody to fulfill a task in their project. Most people who run projects, like me, are generalists themselves. So yeah, think about how you kind of angle yourself in the industry. And this is a long-term thing, right? Like you don't have to do this tomorrow, but yeah. Networking as a sort of social activity is super, super important. Like the reality about how to get jobs and internships is that the really good ones never get advertised. If I tomorrow for a project want to hire a 3D artist or an extra developer, I'm going to first of all go through my Rolodex, which is a really dated term, but like I'm going to go through my Facebook and Twitter and email contacts and be like, oh, who would I really want to work with? And that's maybe 5 people. I'm going to contact them. If none of them are available, I might ask them, like, do you know anybody who's of your similar skill set who might be interested? Or I might even post on Twitter, on my Twitter. So like, if you don't follow me, you would probably never see that. Or I might post in the Icelandic game developers Slack group that like, hey, I'm looking for somebody, but I would like some like references. So we're still several steps away from like this actually becoming a web page with information about a job. I'm just kind of like feathering out my network, right? But at the point where I tweet or I ask somebody on Slack or whatever, I've now reached probably a couple thousand people already in the industry. And this is kind of unfortunately how it works. Like very, very few job posts actually make it to a public spot, except for like big companies, of course. Big companies, it works differently. They will advertise them. If it's big international companies, there's a weird reality where, or there's unfortunate reality where you're also competing with a lot of people who might already live in that city. If it's like US companies, sure, they'll have like, blizzard.com/careers is probably a website that exists or similar. But there you have to be aware that like the competition will be very hard. Definitely worth applying. You might, you'll learn something from it. It's just that the bigger like AAA studios and whatever, their recruiting is like much, much more rigorous, and you're competing with tons and tons of people. Probably also people with way more experience. Beware of crunch. It's another chronic disease that the games industry and software industry, but games especially, have. You probably know what it means, but what it means in reality, it can often be like there's stories of AAA studios who are in perma-crunch. Like literally that's just their state of being, which means that you work 10 to 12 hour days and are just expected to do that. You're not paid overtime, etc. Like it's bad enough, or like it's already bad if it's temporary. It shouldn't happen at all. There's like a lot of conversation in the industry that like it's provably a bad idea on multiple vectors. So yeah, beware that if it is still a real thing, you are not out of place to resist it, even as a junior developer. Like, you don't have to go along with like shitty legacy industry practices. It's usually a sign of a badly run studio at this point. And I mean, and the benefits from doing a job or internship is that you have sort of limited responsibility. You aren't responsible necessarily as much, or not solely responsible for like educating yourself, training yourself, getting more experience. Like, that's partially what the company is supposed to be doing. But of course, you have limited freedom. If you really want to use games to, I don't know, because you think it's fun to make in them, or if you want to express yourself in them, doing a job and internship is a good way to learn more and to, get paid doing so. But it's going to be like quite limiting, because it's unlikely that you get to work on your dream game. In Iceland, your opportunities aren't that big, but at the same time, they kind of are proportionally. If you think about other cities in the world with a population of 200,000, I think there are very few that have this many represented like game studios. There's, CCP, obviously, Solid Clouds, Tea Time, Solfar. I don't think they're still around, but there are, multiple studios that have in the last couple of years been hiring. The best way to find out about this is in the Slack, is for now, and this also changes, so keep your finger on the pulse. But right now there's a Slack group for from the IGI community team, which is now called, it used to be called the IGI community team, it's now called Game Makers Iceland. And in their Slack there's a opportunities channel where people post jobs, internships, etc. I absolutely recommend being part of that, and I'll show you some screenshots from it later to give you an idea. But yeah, so I ask this question every year in the Slack, in the general channel, about like, what advice would you give students regarding finding jobs or entering the industry? CCP or move to another country. That's obviously said as a joke, but it's kind of true if you really want to work in like the AAA games industry. But then from a different perspective, Johannes is a farmer game developer who lives on a farm called Kollafoss, the closest point of civilization is Kvamstangi, I think. And he comes to meetups when he can, and he does it, I think, part-time, as if you consider him to be sort of part-time farmer, part-time game developer. So I think that's a really cool like opposite perspective. Charles said it might be worth mentioning things like rannis, which, yeah, you can apply for money for projects, even for like prototyping or developing ideas there. And also these people are all on the Slack, so you can talk to them. So like Charles, for example, says he knows people who know a lot about how to apply for rannis grants. And another comment from Yoy. Basically, what I'm getting at is this: if you want to work in games, but there aren't any jobs available that make it easy for you to enter, don't just give up on games. Keep trying here at home, look for jobs abroad if it's possible, get experience, go work at a bank if you're feeling adventurous, look into starting on your own, at your own risk. But yeah, there are plenty of ways to sort of be part of the games industry without having a job or internship already. Being part of it is the easiest way to then get a job once it becomes available. Another comment from Alexandra, who works in marketing at CCP, saying networking is key and a lot of jobs don't get advertised. Again, rings with what I said. And then this is from this year, so this was posted a couple days ago, from Hooker, who works at Solid Clouds. We've been doing a lot of interviews recently at Solid Clouds. One thing that's guaranteed to make people review your application closely and get you in the front door of an interview is that you have personal game projects. Seeing a portfolio and someone code, art, creativity in a project is better than a hyper-optimized CV and being able to be charismatic in an interview setting. So this comes down to also like people who've done this for long enough, they know that the discipline is like super important. And when you've done projects and they're publicly available, playable, and I can run them and they're not, completely unplayable or crashing games, then that actually means a lot. That means a lot more than sort of like, oh, look what this person did technically. It's like, oh, look what this person was able to motivate themselves doing. in their spare time. Like especially if it's a free downloadable game or something, it's kind of, I mean, if it's a commercial success, obviously that's even better. But sort of like we all know that like you probably didn't get paid to make this, so it's even more impressive that you were able to do that. So, I mean, yeah, I would spend more time on doing that than on sort of like writing a cover letter. It's of course also more work, but yeah. In Denmark, there's biggest company there that I know of is IO Interactive. They also have, similar to CCP, like regular internships and recruitment stuff. Playdead is super interesting Danish company that I know a lot of people. One of my fellow students got hired there even before graduating. They make Limbo and Inside. But the really cool thing about Denmark is, and again, I'm biased because I used to live there, but there's so many small companies of 1, 2, 3 to 5 to 10 people, because there's a lot of government funding there. So like I said before, the government funding allows people to pitch projects that might have sort of like roles in them that don't have names on it yet. So like there's just a lot of stuff going around, a lot of different jobs and internships possibilities. And yeah, worldwide, keep an eye on Gamma Sutra, which is a website run by the same people who run GDC, the conference. Just has like aggregates a lot of news. A lot of blogs are like, a lot of people from the industry sort of host their blog on Gamma Sutra, and also a lot of like international job postings news gets posted there. I'm a big fan of Twitter. It's both like a terrible hellscape of people with bad opinions, but unfortunately it kind of works as a weird, chaotic, late social media network. Network at events, even locally, if you can ever travel for international events, it is worth it. I think if it's not at huge personal cost, you can, for example, volunteer for GDC, and then you'd only have to pay for transportation, which is still very significantly expensive. But at least there's ways to get into events without having to always pay full price. And if you are ever just traveling, a lot of companies, besides maybe the very biggest ones, are always excited to meet traveling game developers. So visit companies or try to reach out to local game development scenes, and maybe you can attend an event or just have coffee with somebody. It is always like, like a single meeting might not change the needle on your career, but in the long term, doing these things like just creates, it's how you keep your finger on the pulse of what's happening and how to make people also be aware that you exist. It's both like the big things and the small things. Here are some screenshots I took just the other day from the Opportunities channel. So Solid Clouds is hiring people, CCP is hiring QA people. Charles is working at a company called Big Bang, and they're looking for a community engineer. League of Geeks is an Australian company, but they're like an indie studio. They made a game called Armello, but they're growing so fast that they have a careers page, and I think some of them might be remote. And yeah, like there is no good way to find out about this other than being on Twitter or knowing a lot of people, having an online portfolio so also they can find you. But it's very much going to be you have to find out about them, and that's unfortunately a very chaotic process. Whatever you do, I recommend you attend or volunteer at an event or at an international event. I gained so much from doing that. Again, it's kind of proving that you are passionate without necessarily sort of doing it just for the passion. Join an online game jam or a physical game jam. It's a good way to just add another game to the list of things you've made, and also a really good way to like meet people more than just sort of like, oh hey, in short introduction at an event. It's like, no, you might have actually sat down with somebody who either works in the games industry or with somebody who's like yourself trying to get into it, and have actually made something. And if that was a good experience, that's probably going to be super memorable. More important than anything else is finish something, make something, finish it, put it online, or do whatever you want with it. But like having something finished will allow you to evaluate it. If something is unfinished, you will never be able to get a sort of thorough, comprehensive, evaluation of that entire process, which means you're unable to learn from something unless you literally put a stop behind it and get distance from it and be able to look at it, be like, wow, this is something I did. Here's what I learned from it. Or here's how I would do it differently. Just finish stuff. Yeah, make a portfolio is obvious, and it doesn't have to be a lot, but like start by maybe throwing everything you have up there, and then remove as you progress through your career. Start removing stuff that's kind of like less and less relevant or less impressive. Because I also don't want to go to your portfolio and see things that I don't like, things that look bad or whatever. Your first games ever, those are fun for you, but like I wouldn't keep them on there. I don't think they have a place in a sort of like hire me portfolio. Do everything I said about networking. I have yet to hear anybody who said like, nah, it's not worth it. If you're able to just sit in complete isolation and craft out genius games, that's great. Then you probably don't need to listen to me. But besides that, meet as many people as you can in the industry, and hopefully that's the best way to make it turn into something. Share opportunities among friends. Again, like we're all in this together. We're all trying to figure it out. And people do remember when they got a referral from somebody, or when you find out about, oh, we can apply for grants here. If more people apply from the same location or whatever, from the same industry for a grant, sure, that might mean that like in this particular moment we are in direct competition, but it also means that now the people at this grant body might have the ammunition they need to increase the amount of money they make available for games in the future. So like there's long-term benefits for sharing within our industry and community. And surround yourself with like-minded people. Like the absolute best way to never do anything is to never hang out with other people who are creative, and just hang out with people who watch TV and go to sports games. And there's nothing wrong with that, but if you want to create stuff in your lifetime, the best inspiration and the best motivation is to surround yourself with other people who are doing the same. And there's this concept. There's an article, and I don't have a link to it, but concept of you already have a job, right? If you want a job in game development, poof, you already have one. It's unfortunately unpaid for the time being, but what would you do if your job was just to create games day by day? You should be making games. So do that, and hopefully a paid job will come out of it. This is how people who study crafts operate, right? You have to have made a bunch of stuff to be able to enter the industry. You have to have these like years of experience or whatever, but those count even if that job was unpaid, if that makes sense. Like if you spend a year making games while studying or while doing something else or while working a different job, that is still a years of experience of making games. So like consider yourself a game developer if you would like to be, and you'll figure out how to make it a sustainable career sooner or later. Yeah, the starting point if you want to be part of the Icelandic games community is to go to gamemakers.is, and on their about page they have a link to a Slack, which is very similar to Discord if you haven't used it. And on their Slack there's for example, an opportunities channel and an events channel, and also channels about Unity or programming in general, where basically there's more than 300 users in there right now. So like the majority of the Icelandic games community is represented there in some extent. Not everybody uses it as much, but it's a pretty good place to meet like-minded people who are also on the island. Game jams, online game jams are literally happening constantly. It's some more successfully than others or more interesting, but like you're very likely to find a jam organized by someone. And again, contributing to a game jam, an online game jam, is a good way to like meet other people who are doing the same, and maybe do online collaborations, etc. Ludum Dare is another really big one. There's international Slack groups, communities, Twitter, Discord, etc., Facebook groups. And if you can't find any that you like, start your own. It's really as simple as that. It's more about putting in the energy to do it, or to be an active participant in any of the other groups. It's the only way to get something out of it. If you want to know more about all this stuff, here's some of my recommendations and inspirations. I'll just leave it up. I don't have anything meaningful to say about them more. And in conclusion, go make games with your life, or don't. It's kind of up to you. I would very much like it if you did. And if you do, I don't know, let me know. But otherwise, good luck to you anyway. And I think you'll, David hopefully has convinced you or me that there's something that was benefit in having followed this course. Anyway, just real quick to end on, like I've been saying, I think making your first game is the hardest part, and especially finishing it. It's something I think is actually really, really important, even for me still today. So I like to challenge myself and make something in a very, very short amount of time. And it is possible. It really, you learn how to do it, and the main thing you learn from it is sort of confidence in your own skill set. Here's, for example, a game I made for somebody's birthday. That was my excuse, and I started on it around noon, and his birthday party was in the evening. And I made some sort of katamari where you play as this egg. He's upside down now. My friend has a ginger beard, and so has this egg. And you collect Danish Christmas presents and Christmas trees because his birthday was near Christmas. And it's kind of like a katamari game, and you just try to collect as much crap as possible. Very, very silly, very dumb. Gave everybody at the party a hilarious laugh, and taught me a bunch about Unity physics, because that was the only real challenge. These are all Unity primitive objects, I think, as well. This one is a minimal interpretation of Lambert game called Super Crate Box. They asked on Twitter for like some fan art or something, and I ended up in a couple hours in Flash making a 30 by 20 pixel version of their game, released it, and they really, really liked it. And I'm pretty sure our friendship today is partially because I put myself on their radar by doing something fun like this. And again, it taught me a lot about making games in Flash. This was when that was still, relevant. And then much more recently, this happened in February. This is a GIF from the game I talked about earlier, the Gently Down the Marsh game that me, Joey, and Torvi made in 8 hours on one evening. I'm super happy with it. I learned some stuff about colors, graphic design, and honestly game design as well, just from doing this small exercise. And now it's online, and people have liked it and played it on YouTube, which is just always super fun for something that we were able to do in a short amount of time. Here's another thought I'd like you to take away from this course is it's really not about the pen, or it's not about the tech, or it's not about even your technical skill set. It's honestly about what you do with it, and how you use it. And your game design, I think, is more important than the technical development skill in general. And also, fuck games. They are just a medium for expression, and there's many, and they are not more or less valid than any other, like film or literature or poetry or dance or whatever. Don't limit yourself. Like if you want to do something and you want to change what games are for an idea, you're allowed to do that. You don't have to regurgitate what the industry has already been doing just to put your own spin on it. There's a talk with this title by Darius Kazemi, which I recommend checking out if you're interested in exploring that way. The takeaway from that talk is games are a methodology, a tool, an approach, and you should always add more tools to your belts. So similarly to how learning about games can help you be a better software developer or a better person even, learning about other things can have the same effect. And lastly, all of my chaotic advice, I understand is it's hard to maybe like navigate, but the main thing is there is just no one straight route to be to be successful. There is no do this and this will happen at all in games and in a lot of things in life. So I'm trying to kind of like play a lot of different angles with you. The metaphor here that I like thinking about is I can't tell you how to win the lottery. I can only tell you how to buy more tickets. This is from another Darius Kazemi talk called How I Won the Lottery. But think about it like that. Like it's always going to be really risky. So prepare for not winning the lottery, but at the same time, the only way to be better at it is to just try many, many different things and try many times. And to give you an idea on how that looked for me, this is basically my entire career, because this blue thing is me still being in school and writing my master's thesis, and all the different color things are different projects that I did with my company GlitchNap. And some of these are work for hire, some of these were art grants and cultural games grants, and some of these were our own games. Like Invert is in here. It's I think this one and this one. This big blue one is maybe that's our golfing game. Yeah, so it's chaotic. And the very final thought, I already said it before, but I would like to cast this magic spell on you and make you all game developers. All right, thanks for the semester, and I hope to hear from you all in the future. Bye.